So let's talk about import and export. So this is something that you've been already playing with, so there is nothing particularly complicated or important to know, but there are some scenarios that I would like you to fully understand. So let's play around with some examples. I got here my classic component, and then so I would like to create a new one, and I'm going to import and export a few things, right? So I'm going to create a new component called vital.js, and within vital I'm going to export default function you must know this, right? So by doing that, I'm going to return an array of map, filter, find for each, right? So if we do that, then, and listen, I'm going to even try to keep both files in parallel, right? So on the left-hand side, this is my React component. On the right-hand side, this is my JavaScript thingy. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to import it, right? You should know that already. I can do import that from vital, right? So I got my array here, and because of that, I can display the elements of the array, right? How can we display the elements of an array on React? Hello?
Just call the function.
Just call the function. Which function? That function.
You must know this.
Correct?
Put it in.
Yeah. And then what? Right? And then what?
No, you have to put it in.
You can hear the take.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's component.
Greater than and smaller than.
Ah, right. You want to do that? You want to do the greater symbol here. That doesn't make any sense, right?
Yes,
You want to do that? I'm not following you guys. Yeah, I don't know what you're trying to do, but that doesn't make any sense. So exactly, this is not a component. It's just a JavaScript function. You cannot do that. That makes sense when you create a component.
Which is got class compared class.
When you do class, even if it's a function, if you do import React and you return HTML, that's considered as a component. But hey, I'm just returning an array of data. So this is not a component, right? It's just an array. Just an array. So how do we iterate on arrays to display things? Map, thank you. So map, we got important. So then we can just do a guy return. We can an expression. This is vital, and then important. Oops. Yep. And obviously you can add some HTML, some break lines. You know that. Right, so you can do that, and then you don't need that. That's an HTML thingy, right? You see, this is vital, blah blah blah. You cannot see the top of the screen, but I'll add some break lines to help you to read the screen. So break line, break line, break line. Right? You got it there. This is the way we got access to that component. There is nothing really new in here, right? Something you already know. But then the question is, what happened if I want to add a new method here? If I want to do export default function, you should know this.
If you would export default,
Yep.
that means you are exporting only these things from.
Yep, that's correct. That's absolutely correct. If you use export default, you can export just one thing, in theory. But hey, let me go back to the example. Will this work if I rename you must know this to this is vital and I change the variable name?
Yeah,
Why? Why, if my function is called you must know this, but then I import it as this is vital, it still works.
Because not that.
Because of export default.
Yep, that's correct. When you do export default, the only thing you are saying is this will be the only thing that will be exported. So you can rename it if you want. You can use whatever name you want here. This will be absolutely okay. You can call it fire alarm, right?
Because in that file you have only one thing you can export. So it's
Yep, that's correct. But then what happened? As I said, if we want to export multiple things,
delete default.
delete default, right? We delete default, and then what? It won't work. Exactly. Export default was not found. So what do we need to do in that particular case? We need, and I believe you've seen that already, to import whatever we want with curly brackets. So in here, we can pass a list of things we want to import. Like that.
Oh.
And it works, right? So if you don't export default, that means that you can export multiple things, right? Because of that, you need to specify which things do you want to import afterwards.
Oh. But then why do we need the other method? The default.
The default makes sense if you want to export just one thing. If you want to export multiple things, like now, look at that, right? Now exporting two things, correct?
You must know this and you should know this.
Exactly, exactly. And here I'm going to talk about Mongo.
No, isn't it better? And then we use this all the time. Because you can still retrieve just one information, just one function.
Yeah, well, there are different approaches. So let me just give me a second. So how can we display Mongo and CSS? What do we need to do here? This is sorry?
Put it within that
You should know
bracket.
this.
Exactly.
Come on.
You had a comma, you're right. If you think this is too long, you can always split it into a new line. You see, much more readable. And then, you know, you can just add another pair of curly brackets and saying you should know this is almost vital, right? So we got the list of the 4 vital things and the list of the 2 desirable, well, important things. Yeah. Does it make sense?
With important, is that overriding stuff? Or
It's overriding. Like what?
with what extent? Yeah, where you put important.
Important.
Yeah, on the
Important.
You should know this.
No. That could be called Aaron. Again, that's a function, right?
That's just a function.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. So sometimes, you know, what happens if now I change the name here? Will it work or not? Or here? Sorry? It's not going to work. Before it worked, but why now it wouldn't work?
Is it more than one function?
Exactly. So you got default, you can rename it easily. But if you export multiple things, it's not that easy, right? Because if I do that, it will fail. It will say, hey, what's that? There is nothing exported under that naming, right? So if you don't use export default, then you need to match the naming, right? Sometimes namings are wrong. I'll give you an example. So imagine that here we want to return a list of get data, right? So we put it there and it works, but we have another component. Exactly, get data, because multiple components may export the same function name, right? This is a problem. This is a problem because you cannot reuse it. You see, if this is somewhere else, essentially this variable is shadowing the previous one. You cannot do that. But fortunately, with ES6, you can do get data as whatever. So if you do that, right, you can rename it. You can import it with the original name, but then you rename it, and then you have freedom to set whatever name you want.
What, so you have to put as whatever?
As,
That's actually,
yeah.
That's actually proper.
Yeah. Do you remember you did that? I think on app.js. No, I didn't do that, but most of you, I've seen that you did with router
Yeah.
as
9 tasks.
9 tasks exactly. It's 9 or 8. Well, doesn't matter.
No,
Wi-
8, I'm sorry.
with router as router. It could be as Vesna or as whatever you want, right? You got freedom. Why we do that? Because someone thought that with router is a very long name, so you rename it. Any question? Right? So yeah, I mean there are some tricky things here, but I think this is 99% of the things you should know about. So again, when you export, you can export default one thing, or you can export multiple things. Actually, question for you: will that make any sense? Right? No. Well, it fails, right? But ignore the left-hand side, just from the exporting point of view. Will that make any sense?
It will always export only get data.
That's not true. That's not true. Look, if you got that, so the default, look at that. That's a powerful example. You can add that default here, and then comma. Well, no, sorry, I forgot to rename it. Yeah, so you see that works. So in other words, when you import, let me try to format this a bit, even though resolution is not great. Look at that line. So you can import the default without the brackets, like you are doing already, and then comma, and then you add the brackets with the secondary exports. So this, you know when this is useful? Imagine that you created a component and then you wanted to export just one thing, but then 3 months later you realize that you want to add a second exportable method, right? So if you remove the default, you will have to change all the imports, right? Because you will need to add all the curly brackets everywhere. So this is a good way for compatibility reasons. So if you just have the first one and then you want to add a second one, yeah, so this is backwards compatible. You don't need to add the brackets. The brackets only surround non-default exports. Does it make sense?
Yeah.
And that's why I'm sure some of you have seen, which is not what I like to do, but hey, it still works, that when you import React, some people does that. Instead of doing React.component, you can do comma, component, so then you can simplify this line a bit.
What's better practice?
That's personal styling, to be honest. I don't like that, because to me, is the effort of adding a comma, curly bracket, typing component, close curly bracket. So this requires me extra effort and just import React, keep it simple, and then do React.component. But again, just a subtle personal preference. Then, just final suggestion. Please try to avoid adding lots of exports on a single file. My rule of thumb is one file, one export. That ensures that your components will be small. Otherwise, you'll end up having like a box of shit with hundreds of components being exported at the same time. Don't do that. If you want to do that, create a new file and export default. That helps to keep your code simple, readable, and well structured. Any question? No? Cool. That's it, guys. Cheers.